My ex-boyfriend was murdered, and I was the #1 suspect. The townspeople think I'm the killer, although there's no substantial evidence to suggest it, just because I'm an anomaly.
My name is Kaya Clark, and I grew up living in this swamp. I have 2 sisters and a brother, and I was supposed to be a happy family but my dad always liked to hit people. Just playing on the boat with my sister, my father rushed over to me and pulled me ashore and hit me hard. My mom rushed over to try to stop it, but I didn't realize that my dad started hitting my mom again. This beating and arguing went on until late at night, and I covered my ears, hoping it would end soon. The next morning, I was fetching water when I heard the heavy slamming of the door. It was my mom, and she walked out the door with her suitcase without looking back. I rushed out to catch up with her, but she was long gone. After my mother left, our situation became even more difficult. My father still beat us a lot, and my 2 sisters were unable to cope and chose to leave. The last to leave was my brother Judy. He wanted to take me, but couldn't help it because he was a child himself. My brother told me to hide in the depths of the swamp if I was in danger. From the lessons of my siblings, I learned how to get along with my father and try to hide from him. I often went alone to explore the depths of the swamp, which was overgrown with bushes and small animals living happily. One day, I got lost deep in the swamp, only to see my brother's friend again. Tate reassured me it was okay and helped me get back home. Watching him gently wave at me for the first time, I didn't seem so afraid. I approached my father carefully and told him that I was hungry. My father didn't get angry like before. He took me to the store in town and bought a bag of flour and some food. The store was owned by a gentle and kind couple. Mrs. Mabel, who knew of my family situation, kindly reminded me that I was going to school and quietly gave me a lollipop. I listened to Mrs. Mabel and tried to go to school, but my classmates laughed at me for being dirty and didn't want to share a table with me. This was the only day I went to school, and I felt like I couldn't fit in on campus and that it was more important to learn in the field. It seemed that for a while, my dad was still nice to me. He would take me fishing with him, and after learning that I liked feathers, he even gave me his marching bag. I got a letter from my mom. I was so happy that I handed the letter to my dad and wanted him to tell me what my mom had written. But to my surprise, my dad read it and burned the letter angrily and told me that my mom would never come back. At night, Dad found all of Mom's belongings and burned them. Suddenly one day, Dad was gone too, and although it wasn't as painful as when Mom left, the loneliness was an empty feeling. After Dad left, I began to face the problem of how to survive. With so little food left in the house, I had to get up at 4 in the morning and go to the marsh to pick mussels, then take them to the store for food and gasoline for the boat, just as Dad had done. Mrs. Mabel knew what I was going through, and she took me some offering from the church and taught me simple arithmetic. This went on for a long time, until October 1969.
2 young boys found a man's body at the edge of the swamp, and after careful identification by the police, it was that of Chase, the town's famously wealthy young man, who had died around 2 a.m. in the morning. Chase's body was underneath the fire tower, and the geogrid on the top floor of the fire tower was open, so the police determined that Chase's death could have been an accident. But police found Chase's blood and hair on a stand at the bottom of the fire tower. The medical examiner determined that the back of the head impact brace was the primary cause of Chase's death. For the back of the head to hit the brace, then Chase should have been head down, but this speculation is inconsistent with the scene, so it is possible that Chase was pushed down. But there were no fingerprints or footprints on the railing, not even those of the deceased, but police found red fibers on the jacket, which were tested to be wool, but not on Chase's clothes. News of Chase's death quickly spread through the streets, and the townspeople were talking. I became the prime target of suspicion, as people usually had a lot of prejudice against me. The police targeted me, and as if to confirm those suspicions, they found a red hat in the room, but there was no sign of me. I remembered my brother's words and paddled quickly to the depths of the swamp. Little did I realize that the police had taken out 2 speedboats and caught up with me in the depths of the swamp. I was a little alarmed by the sight and dived in the water to try to escape, but in the end, I was unsuccessful. The police arrested and jailed me for murder, which will be prosecuted by the court in a few days. An old man named Tom came to jail, a famous retired lawyer in town, and one of the few people who ever cared about me. He took it upon himself to bring it to the court to try to defend me because he didn't believe I would kill anyone. But for so many years, I lived alone and never responded to Tom's kindness. On his way out, Tom handed me a shell manual. I looked at the shelves in the manual and called out to Tom, who was about to leave. I talked to Tom about the specific reasons why my parents and siblings had left, and about my own tragic experiences over the years.
Since Dad left, I lived alone within the swamp. It wasn't until 1962 that I found a feather under a big tree by the swamp. I was fascinated by the feather, and over time, every day, a different feather and food would be placed by the big tree, and there would even be some notes. I would treasure these even though I didn't recognize the contents of the notes. On that day, I went to the big tree again and realized that the original person who had been putting out the feathers and food was Tate. He knew I liked birds and their feathers and came here often. I told him I couldn't read or write and couldn't read the note he had left. After that, Tate took it upon himself to teach me to read, and we grew close. I invited Tate to my home to read, and he saw that the walls of my house were covered with pictures of all kinds of animals. Tate was a little amazed at how each of my drawings came to life, as if they had some kind of life in my world. During this time, I went through everything from simple words to sentences to very difficult grammar, as well as adjectives. From summer to fall, we read about how all the plants and animals have adapted to changes in the earth over time. Then later, Tate's father found out about it. He reminded Tate not to forget his dream of going to college, and that people like me shouldn't get involved with them. Soon, I was hauled off to trial. The court indicted me for first-degree murder, and the family of the deceased asked that I be executed. Tom told me that there was an option called a plea bargain. If I plead guilty to my crime, then I would be sentenced to 10 years in prison, but would be released on bail after 6 years. If I continued to insist on a trial, the result would be life in prison or release in port. I was very adamant about abandoning the first option, and I was not willing to spend the rest of my life in jail, no matter what the cost. Soon after, the second trial began, with the prosecution accusing me of pushing Tess off the fire tower between midnight and 2 a.m. on October 30th, and then covering up my footprints and fingerprints. The defense attorney for the other side also suggested that I had a case for Chase's murder, and I was a little nervous when Tom handed me a piece of paper to reassure me not to be afraid. Then he cited multiple cases, as well as the objective judgment of the townspeople. Watching Tom's sharp words, my uneasy heart also calmed down.
Thoughts go back to a sunny, warm morning when Tate and I were chatting in the big tree. He told me his mom and sister had died in a car accident on his birthday, leaving him and his father at home. I was heartbroken for him, but had nothing to say. That's how two lonely people met to be together, and we naturally became a couple. Then later, Tate received his college acceptance letter. Before he left, he handed me a list of publishers. He wanted me to mail the drawings and notes to a publisher so I could make some money and not have to work so hard digging muscles every day to make ends meet. Tate promised that he would be back in a month to meet me at the beach to watch the fireworks and spend the 4th of July together. I looked forward to his return every day during the time we were apart. When the day finally arrived, I wore a beautiful dress and special makeup. But after waiting at the beach all day and night, Tate didn't end up showing up. I realized after I cried that Tate and life and love were really the same, and they all left me. But only the swamp could pick me up when I fell. Grief dissipates too, like water seeping into the sand and carrying traces to the depths. The prosecution argued that no footprints or fingerprints appeared around the deceased or in the vicinity of the fire tower, so it was clear that someone had deliberately destroyed the evidence. Expecting them to say that, Tom pulled out the tide tables for the early hours of the day. According to the tide tables, it is possible that the footprints were washed away by the tide, and the absence of the footprints would not prove that I committed the crime. Tom also brought out a notice from the Forest Service that last July, the Forest Service found the geogrid to be very dangerous and gave the town a notice to correct, but the town department has been slow to do so. One day, in 1968, I came back from the beach and was surprised to find a man taking pictures in front of his house. I quickly ran to the town to ask for help from the Jameses, who told me that the man was a developer and that they were surveying the swamp and wanted to drain it to build a hotel. Mrs. Mabel told me that I needed to find the paperwork for the land so that I could prove that I owned the house. As I was leaving the store, I ran into Chase. He was a well-known rich kid in town, and he invited me to a picnic on his boat on Sunday. I attended Chase's picnic, and he picked up red shells on the ground, which I was familiar with by name, origin, and habits. Chase complimented me on how special I was, and he gave me the shells as a gift, while his mind was on how to pounce on me. I pushed him away, refusing completely, and Chase apologized for his abruptness. He then took me to his secret base, a fire tower that had long been in constant disrepair. Standing on the fire tower, looking out over the swamp in the distance, it felt like seeing an old friend of many years. Chase followed me home, but still confessed his love for me. Perhaps having been truly alone for too long, I agreed to go out with Chase. Shortly afterward, I received a response from the publisher. I told Chase the good news, and even made him a necklace, a shell I had found on the beach, which he wears all the time. Now that Chase is dead, the necklace is gone. Chase's mother thinks that a murderer took the necklace, and that murderer must be me. Because not long ago, Chase told his mother that he broke up with me. She thinks I killed Chase on purpose, because I couldn't have him. Tom immediately objected because the police searched my house thoroughly and didn't find this necklace. It was 1969 again, and after 6 years, Tate had finally returned from his studies. Didn't want to face him. He had broken our promise, but I was now Chase's girlfriend, until the day I saw Chase in town with a woman who claimed to be his fiancée. That Chase had been lying to me the whole time. In truth, I had known that no one would stay for me. Shortly afterward, my first book finally came out, along with a $5,000 fee for the manuscript. I paid back the taxes Dad owed earlier, and also gained ownership of 310 acres of land. Chase harassed me and tried to use violence against me. I fought back by picking up rocks off the ground in my struggles and angrily ran deeper into the swamp in an attempt to calm myself down. When I returned home, I found my room long in shambles. Chase had taken out all of his anger at me on the paintings. It also made me finally understand my mom, that there is no end to living in fear. I couldn't let myself go down my mom's old path again, and I definitely couldn't live a life of fear.
Mrs. Mabel commissioned Tate to come to my house to see me, since I hadn't been around for a long time. Miss Tate saw the bruises on my face, and he was pissed, knowing it had to be Chase. I was going to go to Greenville next week to meet the publisher and talk about the next book, but now the bruises on my face are making me start to hesitate. Tate comforted me and gave me his hat on his way out. So, on the morning of October 29th, I got on the shuttle bus to Greenville. There were several witnesses from the town who also saw the scene, as Mr. Foster of the publishing house can testify. About 7 o'clock that evening, October 29th, I had dinner with other colleagues and told them stories about female insects eating their male mates. Although everyone thought it was immoral, I don't think there is a dark side to nature. It's just a way of creating survival. The next morning, October 20th, Foster claimed that there was nothing out of the ordinary about me when he saw me again, so they agreed that I was not suspected of the crime. The prosecution's defense attorney, however, argued that I had taken the early morning night train back to town to commit the crime, and then returned to the hotel on the night train to Greenville after the crime, and this statement was mere speculation, as there was no evidence. Tom gave another account of my life before the jury reached a verdict. He had lived in this town all his life, and had heard the rumors of the swamp girl, but I was just an abandoned child, raised alone in the swamp, and in all those years only James and the Mabels had cared for me while everyone else thought I was an alien. Now the right to adjudicate alienation falls to the townspeople. Tom argued that everyone in the room had to make a ruling based on the evidence presented in court, not on the rumors and feelings of those 25 years. This time I put my trust in Tom, and as it turns out I was right, that the court found me not guilty. I got rid of the label of small-town deviant, and life got back on track. I stayed with Tate anyway, trying to follow my heart. I went on to publish many books, and still lived in the swamp. Early one morning I paddled into the depths of the swamp again. This time I saw my mom. When Tate was organizing his belongings, he found a book, and on one of the pages of the book was a portrait of Tess, and behind the portrait a red shell necklace.